Hello, everybody. This is Patrick here, and it's a pleasure to be here at the Polyglot gathering. And I was in doubt, really. I was in doubt about which kind of language should I use to start that. So, nie wiem, jeśli chcę mówić po polsku, ale myślę, że może по rosyjsku. Всем привет. Меня зовут Патрик, я из Бразилии. Не знаю, я начал изучать русский, думаю, что 8 лет назад. Ам, Думаю, что не могу говорить свободно, но могу говорить без проблем. Okay, but I want to maintain this live stream mostly in English for a very specific reason. That is, um, if you're thinking about learning Slavic languages, so I would like to help you out with that. So even if you are at the very beginning, right? So that would be interesting that you could understand me like fully, completely, right? So here we have the yeah, okay. I would like to say that here we have all the Slavic languages, but that's not true. We have most of them, and I would like to talk a little bit about my experience with Slavic languages before we dive in. So as I said, I have started learning Russian 8 years ago. 8 years ago, yes, 2014, yeah, kind of. And at the beginning, that was hell on earth because in Russian we have we have first different alphabet. I have this first contact with a song in Russian, and I would like to know more about the band and everything, but I've just realized that I could not read a single word, and then we have a different alphabet and everything. And my first thought was I would never learn this language. That's so freaking difficult. And then it took me a long time, but right after that, I found a language partner from Ukraine, and she started teaching me Russian from zero. Like the only things I knew at the time was "Привет, как дела? Все хорошо, а ты?" And then, she was very patient and started teaching me and speak to me like English, Russian, each and every sentence twice a week. So that was my first experience with Russian, and it took a long, long time to start really learning and speaking it. Right after that, I thought, okay, I have this language partner who's my friend, and her native language is also Ukrainian. So I would really like to learn her language and connect. Like, because, languages are just tools and people are the goal. Normally, we think about people as tools to learn languages. And now I need a teacher, I need a language partner, I need to practice. But actually, like it's the other way around. Like you use the languages to connect to people. So languages are tools. And I thought, okay, I really want to learn her native language. And then I had this first idea about learning Ukrainian, and then I found out a different language that after studying Ukrainian, I found out a different language that was very similar to Ukrainian. And when I listened to that, I use it to think, okay, that's Ukrainian, but I'm not understanding, like not fully what's going on. And then that was Belarusian. And the funny thing is that every time I try to practice Belarusian in some language exchange apps, the native speakers they keep telling me like, "Oh, really? Belarusian? Why? No, I use only Russian, so you shouldn't worry about it. Come on, man, just focus on improving your Russian." But have you ever listened to Belarusian songs? They are amazing. It's a very beautiful language. I really like it. And then I started studying it, and it was quite difficult because try to find some materials to study it. So again, I found a language partner, and I keep talking to this guy twice a week. He's from Minsk, and normally we use English, Belarusian as a language exchange. Well, after that, I started with Polish, but at this time I knew that I was really passionate about Slavic languages, and then I listened to a Polish singer called Agnieszka Chlińska, and then I started studying Polish. And the thing about Polish is, the first look, you think, okay, they use the same alphabet, so that's gonna be easier. That's not true. That's not true because if you're a Polish native speaker or if you speak Polish, so you probably can relate. Then we have complicated stuff like tongue twisters, for example. Then we have that's kind of tricky, right? And you look to that and you think, where are the vowels? What happened with the vowels? So, but I would like to say that I have been studying Polish for 1 year and a half, and that's currently my favorite language. I really love that, even though I like speaking Russian and all. But Polish is my thing. Polish is my favorite language. I really love every single part of its grammar, every single part of the pronunciation, everything, everything. Um, and recently, I mean, like 2 months ago, I've started learning Czech as well. I have this distant future dream about learning all the Slavic languages, but I don't really know. I'm just focusing on the present moment. Right. So let's see. First, I guess it's interesting for us to understand where they come from and why they are so similar. And here I have this example of a reconstructed Proto-Slavic language. So the curious thing is, if you are Slavic language native speaker, or if you speak some of the Slavic languages in a good level, so you probably can understand a lot of words here. If I try to pronounce it, maybe my pronunciation will not be accurate because you know um, I don't really know which pronunciation should I use, but I can understand because like все, 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 людей, and then we have words like свободны. What else? Bratislava at the end, So that's a funny thing. Like maybe it's not like you can simply start listening to all the Slavic languages and understand everything. But you feel like after you learn your first Slavic language, you feel like with the others that you're welcome. You know, feels like the languages tells you, oh, you're welcome. You just feel home. Feels like walking around a different neighborhood but inside the same city. That's a feeling that you have. At least that's a feeling that I have, right? So, and then I have some subgroups. That's would be interesting if you are language learning addicted like I am. So that would be interesting for you, or probably you already know that. Then we have the East Slavic group, the West Slavic group, and South Slavic group. And as you can see, the reason why I thought about Polish, it was because I could speak like Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, but it's all on the one side, East Slavic. And then I thought, okay, what about the other side? And as you can realize, I don't speak any South Slavic language, so probably there's gonna be next one on the list. Yeah. But that's just out of curiosity. Um, and here we have the alphabet. That's the Cyrillic alphabet. That was my first nightmare with Russian because you know the first impression it's like what the hell is going on. But then when you take a closer look at that, you see that I have a lot of familiarity. And here, don't get me wrong, that's not the Russian alphabet. That's the Cyrillic alphabet completely. So you're gonna see that some words here they don't exist in Russian. For example, some letters here they don't exist in Russian. So you see some Ukrainian letters here, Belarusian letters. So, but if you have the intention, like I do, to learn two, three, or maybe more Slavic languages, I would say that would be a good idea for you to learn the complete alphabet. Think about it. And then I wouldn't like to transform this presentation into just theory and theory and theory. I'd like to give you some tools so you can really use them. And here is how I learned the alphabet the first moment. I use it a lot of memorize, but if you don't like memorize, you can use any kind of app that gives you the spaced repetition system. I really think it's a good idea about new alphabets. So I did the same thing with Hebrew, for example. I use a lot of memorize and spaced repetition and handwriting. Yeah. I know that could be a little bit boring at the beginning, but you need to repeat a lot. Yeah. Don't feel frustrated. Yeah. Like just copy, like kids at school when they learn how to write. When they learn how to write, they need to repeat a lot. And we have this special, at least here in my country, we have this special notebook for kids that you have like a sentence and they need to copy it again and again and again exhaustively. But of course, that's probably boring. I don't remember when I was a kid, but probably that was not my favorite hobby. Like, oh, I would like to read, I would like to write the same sentence 4,000 times. No, but that's important, right? Um, so I would say that if you practice enough and use spaced repetition and handwriting, like copying it, you can learn the Russian alphabet, like I don't know, 1 week, 2 weeks, and then of course I'm not saying that you will feel free to use it whenever you want and read everything. No, but you can have a good idea about it, and then you need to practice more and more and more. Um, and you never stop learning a language. So, for example, at the moment I'm reading this book, there was a gift from a friend of mine. That it's Sherlock Holmes, Рассказы or Sherlock Holmes, yeah, Arthur Conan Doyle. So I'm reading that because I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. The language exchange, like using the language, exposing yourself, listening to some stuff, and all kinds of things, they will be good. They give you a good level, but if you want to achieve proficiency levels, so I honestly believe that you need more. Like reading full books or studying the grammar, drilling exercises, all that. You need more, right? And you need to always think, like, what do I want with this language? Do I want to be able to have a simple conversation? Or I want high fluency, or I want to be able to, I don't know, to just travel and order some coffee. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong about it, right? But you just need to think about what you want. Oh, here's a nice thing to play with. How to identify any Slavic language at a glance. Say, you're gonna see, as I mentioned before, there are some specific letters that they just appear in some different Slavic languages, right? So here you can see that. And this, it's not gonna help you to speak better, but it's a good tool that you can use for fun. Like when you read some Slavic languages content, so you can have a glimpse and say like, oh, okay, this is Belarusian because of this letter here. Ukratka, this is Ukrainian because of yeah, that's Bulgarian, that's whatever. Um, I Okay, that's a strange hobby of mine, but I like to compare texts in different Slavic languages. So sometimes it's funny to realize, like, oh, I recognize this. This belongs to this language. So think about it, and you're gonna see that some languages like Russian, it's not here. But so that's not a perfect tool, just something to play with. Right? But to me, that's really really interesting. So I hope you enjoy as much as I do. Okay, and then we have cases. That's the nightmare. That's a nightmare. Come on. Because at least that's a nightmare for the beginners, right? Because look, in English, for example, if you know all the words of a sentence, you can perfectly use it. If you know pronoun, verb, and object, like I read books, I read a book, for example, I read the book, you can do that. But in Russian, for example, if you know, okay, what is the first person singular? Okay, yeah. What is the verb? Глагол читать. Okay, I need to conjugate. Okay, I remember that. Yeah, читать, я читаю. So what is the word for book? Oh, книга. Книга. Okay. So I can say, я читаю книга. No, читаю книгу. Why? Because it's accusative case, feminine. Turns into oo sound. And we have this a lot. But don't worry too much about it. You just need to be patient. You just need to be patient because you need to internalize it. And that's something I call grammar instinct. Yeah. Think about your native language. Think about your native language, and let's think that your native language is English, right? So when you're speaking to someone, you don't really think like, okay, here I need present perfect. No, I guess this for this sentence I need simple past. No, I have tried before. I tried. No, wait. My grammar book says that I need to. No, you don't do that, right? You simply know basic stuff. If I say she don't, so you think about no, she doesn't, but you don't think about grammar and why you should do that. You just it just sounds awkward, and then you automatically know. If you have enough experience and patience with the language, you will develop this grammar instinct in any other language that you want to learn. Yeah. So when you speak the Slavic language, you don't think all the time like, okay, no, wait, that like I did now. I did now as an example, but when I speak, I don't think like, okay, I need accusative case and then feminine. No, that's feminine, that's masculine. So I need to change this verb into. No, no, we don't do that, right? You just feel the language pumping into your brain, and you need to focus on that. Yeah, and here we have the 7 grammar cases, but yeah, in Russian I have only 6. But you should learn if you have the intention to if you have the intention to learn 2 or more Slavic languages, you should focus on learning all of them. You don't need to you don't need to stress out with drills, exercise, and that kind of stuff. At the first moment, all you need to know is how they work. So when you see a simple sentence like "Я читаю книгу," you don't get desperate and think like, "Oh, it's over. Come on, now I will never learn this language because it's impossible." Because no, you know that we have grammar cases and the words will change. So you just need to have a general idea about all of the cases, and then of course, through time, you get familiar with them. And as I said, recognizing patterns. You know. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But if you want to learn Slavic languages, you need to transform your brain to a machine to recognize patterns, and actually all languages, right? Um, but so if you start recognizing patterns, you have a better guess when you try to speak, and you don't know. Like, okay, I really don't know, but I think that's gonna be like this, and the chances are you're gonna do it correctly. Yeah. Oh, but what if I make a mistake? So you make a mistake. Part of the process. Yeah. Like, um, the funny thing is, like, normally when when I speak to Russian native speakers for the first time, they always tell me like, "Oh, you speak really well. That's impressive." And but after I don't know 2 hours conversation, they start to see my mistakes, and then sometimes they tell me, sometimes they don't. Sometimes I ask them like, "Please spot my mistakes." And that's part of the process. Nothing happens if you make a mistake. You just it's just wrong. So and then what? So but focus about it, recognizing patterns and patterns. And here, as I promised, practical tool. There is this strategy that I like to use. I call it anchor. So um, if you have similar sentences in your brain, so for example, here I have the word, and please ignore if this sentence is a little bit awkward, but it makes sense. Here I have like words, names, because in Russian and Slavic languages in general we change names also. Um, but here I have like words like Anna, grupa, and then when I want to deny that, like ani нет группы, um, you can see that in the second sentence we have a similar situation because I have the word Katya and then Vada, and then I have Ukati нет воды. So if you have this list of sentences in your head, and you know, like, okay, in this situation, I need to do like this. So when you're talking and you need to remember something, you think, okay, no, let me think about it. So you remember your sentence and you know that the ending will be just the same, right? Um, So, but what about exceptions? You need to deal with them. You know, for example, there's an exception in Russian that I think it's quite cool, because you learn like every time you have this prepositional case that you have na and then yeah, but then you have a very famous expression like on the floor. You have the word Paul, and then we need to be Napoleon, but no, Napalu, and then you think makes no sense. Whatever. If you want to learn a language, stop resisting. Do not resist the language. Don't think like, no, but in my language that makes no sense. But come on, no, no, don't do that. Just embrace it. Just embrace it. Um, think about you're looking to the word with a different perspective. So it's just like that. I would have exceptions. Oh, really? Just deal with them. The same thing that makes a language difficult makes a language wonderful, beautiful, or whatever you want to call it. Here I have again more um, funny things, like the common vocabulary between some Slavic languages. And the funny part about common vocabulary is that we have a wrong conception that is, oh, we have a lot of common vocabulary. So if I speak Russian, I speak Polish. No, not really. Not really. You need to really work on that. And that's something that you need to worry about. When you're learning a new when you're learning a new language that it's similar to some language that you already speak. So do not underestimate it. Put a lot of effort learning that, because you're gonna need it. Don't underestimate, because if you do that, chances are you will understand the language, but you will suffer a little bit when you try to speak them. Yeah. And because probably you're gonna mix them all. So, and thinking about that, I have this technique on how to avoid mixing them. Yeah, that's a strategy that I use. Oh, Patrick, so you're saying that you don't mix the language? No way. I do. I do a lot. So right now I'm learning Czech. So I use a lot of Polish when I try to speak in Czech. Myślę, że, myślim, że. That's very, very similar. So when I speak Ukrainian, sometimes подобно, подібно. What else? And Belarusian and Ukrainian. So come on, that that was really complicated for me to maintain separated. And even now, like I use a lot of. I would say nobody ever told me that, but I would say that I speak Belarusian like with an Ukrainian accent, because sometimes the words are just the same, but they have different accents, yeah, different ways to pronounce the same word. So how to avoid mixing these languages? The the strategy that I like to use, I called the imaginary master. And in my case, as I mentioned before, I have one language partner for for each language that I speak, right? And I talk to these people frequently, normally like twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. So when I think about a word, so for example, imagine that I want to say dokładnie tak. Tak, tak, dokładnie tak. And then for 1 second, I got confused. Like, oh, dokładnie tak. To jest po polsku, to jest po białorusku, nie pamiętam. Like, oh, okay, I don't remember. So I'm gonna think, where or who said that? And then I try to remember. And I have this Belarusian friend of mine, Nikita, and I have this Polish friend of mine, Magdalena. And then I'm gonna think, okay, can I remember any situation when Nikita said dokładnie tak? No. Can I remember any situation when Magda said dokładnie tak? Yes, of course. So I remember that she said that, and then I remember that, okay, that's Polish. So you need to attach the language, your target language, to something else, emotional background. If you build different emotional backgrounds to the language that you're speaking, so you maintain them separate in a better way, because we do that already, but not with different languages, of course. We do that. For example, Imagine that you want to talk to a kid, and then right after that, you want to talk to your boss. When you talk to your kid, probably gonna say like, "Hello, sweetheart, are you hungry?" When you talk to your boss, you don't do that, and you don't say to your boss like accidentally like, "Good morning, sweetheart, are you hungry?" Like, no, you never do that, right? Because it's your boss. Because you have a different emotional background for your kids and for your boss. So you automatically change it. And then, but what if, there's no what if. There's no what if. You simply know. You don't mix because you have different backgrounds. So when you have language partners, you can use this chance to build a different background. So that's normally what I do when I want to separate the languages. Of course, sometimes it doesn't work perfectly. It's just a suggestion. So if you say like, "But Patrick, I don't really know how to do that because I speak with the same person in Ukrainian and Russian, in Ukrainian and Polish." Okay, so that maybe that could be a problem for you. But you can try to build different, you know, different triggers for different languages. I guess it would be really, really useful for you. Um, but so, to make a long story short, what you should do in order to learn Slavic languages? First, be patient. Of course, if you are a Slavic language native speaker and you want to learn a new one, so probably your learning curve will be different. You learn faster. But if it's not the case, so be patient, um, and understand the cases. You don't need to be a grammar addicted, but just understand the cases, know how they work, and have fun, right? But also, if you're gonna learn Russian or Ukrainian or some language that is the Cyrillic alphabet, so please focus on that. Yeah. Don't think like, okay, I'm going to adapt, I'm using the Latin alphabet, and then, no, don't do that. It's not so difficult like it looks on the first sight. Because you look at that and you think, like I did someday, like, that's impossible. Come on, that's so difficult. It's not. It's easier than you think. Yeah, you just need to insist a little bit more. And then, one last thing. A lot of people tell me, "Oh, Polish, really, man, that's the hardest language of the world. So Russian, come on, that's freaking hard. So why?" You should, you should never do that. So, never think that the language that you want to learn is hard. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because if you do that and you keep repeating to yourself, like, "Oh, that's so hard. Russian is so hard. Polish is so hard. It's a very hard language." So you start to internalize it. You start to internalize it and then you start believing that. And it's so hard that you will never be able to learn it. So don't do it. Every time you think, "Oh, that's hard," no, that's different. Because honestly speaking, there is no hard or easy language. I don't believe in that. So we have different or similar languages. So if you are a Brazilian, for example, and you can understand a lot of Italian, you're gonna think like, "Oh, Italian is a very easy language." But then for a Chinese native speaker who speaks only Chinese, so Italian could be hell on earth. So it's just a different referential. So think about Finnish. A lot of people say that Finnish is the hardest language in the world. But if you ask a Estonian guy, so maybe the guy will say, "No, actually, yeah, I can understand a lot." You know, so don't say that to yourself again and again, like, "Oh, that's so hard. That's so hard." That's not hard, just different, right? Just different. So I would like just to say, if you wanna interact with me, you can easily find me on Instagram. I use my name and surname, like here, Patrick Lencastre. So that's how you can find me on Instagram. And I always try to reply each and every person. So don't be shy. Talk to me. I love interact with people. I love to know new people, new cultures. So it's always a good moment for me. So let's see if you guys have some questions. I would like to dedicate this kind of 10, 15 minutes, I don't know, to some different questions. What is your advice for learning the first Slavic language as a central language, lingua franca, to learn and understand other Slavic languages more easily? Oh, that's good. That's exactly what I did. So, you should be patient about learning one language. Let me give a personal example. I have been studying Russian for 8 years, but I really wanted to study Ukrainian for, I don't know, it has been 6 years. But I kept holding myself like, no, I need to improve my Russian first. I need to improve my Russian first. You know, my language partner, who's a great friend of mine, so we have been speaking like consistently for 8 years, and of course, I really wanted to speak her language. I mean, Ukrainian, but I knew that at the time, if I tried to learn both at the same time, I would totally mess up. So I would say that you should learn the first language, the first Slavic language as a central language, to a, I would say, very good level, but that's hard to define. Like, what do you mean by very good level? So the moment that you can, express yourself quite well, um, and after that you start adding new Slavic languages. Um, and if you start adding like one on one, that would be better. That would be better than trying to learn like three, four at the same time. Because if you try to do that, you probably mix all of them, right? So my suggestion would be learn the first one and then insist on this until you have a good level. Um, and I would say that you should start with, okay, two things. I would probably start with Russian or Polish. Because you have a lot of material in that. Like if you think, oh, I would like to start with Belarusian, you don't even have material to do that, right? But also, you need a lot of motivation. So if I say no, come on, start with Russian or Polish, and then you say, but I really love Czech. I really love the Czech culture, the Czech. So start with Czech. Your motivation would be the most important thing, because if it's not, it's the first time with a Slavic language, so you need to be patient, right? So that's what I would say. Choose the first one and be consistent until you achieve a high level or acceptable level, like until you express yourself freely, and then you can go for the next one. Yeah, and think about the diagram that I showed here. So if you learn like Russian and then after that you want to learn Ukrainian or Belarusian, that would be more similar than learning Polish, for example, that you have the Latin alphabet, or But so choose the first one, and that's gonna be your core, your language core for the others. But if you build a weak language core, so that would be a problem because you cannot use this language to help you out because you struggle with this language. So that would be my advice. Choose the first one and achieve a good level on that. So, do we have more questions? What do you think about inter-Slavic? Does it work? Can it be helpful learning Slavic languages? Um, well, I have never really tried. And every time you think like, oh, does it work? Can it be helpful? I can never say that something works or no, because look, sometimes we watch some videos, for example, and the guy says, so I speak five different Slavic languages and I did this method, so you should try. And then you try exactly what the guy said, and then you think, oh, come on, I'm not learning, I'm not making progress, I'm a terrible student. Oh, come on, what should I do? Because this guy did it and it was perfect for him. You need to adapt. So I have never used it, but if you try and you think like, okay, it's working, come on, I'm making progress, so do it. So as an example, I love speaking from day zero. So that's how I learned Polish. I knew just three sentences and I started a conversation. And then, of course, there was a terrible conversation and I tried again and again and again and again. And now I can speak. But I know if you are more introvert and you use the methods that I just described, so probably it would be a disaster, right? And then you may think, come on, but Patrick did it and it was great. Yeah, great for my profile. So every person learns in a different way, and you need to discover what is good for you, right? So, but talking about my experience, no, I have never used it. What is our strategy for acquiring new vocabulary? That's a good question. Thank you for asking. So we have two ways to acquire new vocabulary. The one that I'm gonna call the artificial way and the natural way. So the artificial way, I like to use spaced repetition and flashcards, just like I mentioned with the alphabet and memorize. Yeah, so you can have like um, you read a book or you read you have the lessons like okay I'm following assimil course. Okay, so you take this new words that you want, the new vocabulary, and then you create flashcards and you keep revising them. But think about this: all these strategies to acquire new vocabulary, they work just like training wheels on a bicycle. Because imagine that you need to do that with your native language nowadays. Like, no, I need to sit down and memorize it. How do you know vocabulary? How do you know all this vocabulary in your native language? Like, you just have experience with that. You just use the language. You just live in this language. But I'm gonna give you one strategy. So the first strategy is if you have a beginner or even pre-intermediate level like A1, A2, that would be good, like conversations, and then you can take notes about conversations, and during the conversation, then you revise using flashcards. But if you have a B2 level or B1, also you can do that. What I recommend is take a book like this one, or whatever you like in the language, and then after you read it, you can do that every chapter or the whole book. After you read it, you try to summarize the idea, writing about it using your own way. Okay, the book talks about this or that. And right after this, you send a message to your language partner or tutor or teacher or the person who's helping you. I do that with my language partners. So you send a message describing, like, so I've just read this book and talks about this, and this person will correct your mistakes. And during the call, you can discuss about it. So let's talk about the book that I was reading that I sent you the message. So this will force, because normally we read books and then we don't remember a lot of things. But this strategy forces your brain to use the passive vocabulary that you acquire from the book, right? So you will just transform the passive vocabulary into active vocabulary, right? That's how I normally like to do. But just think like acquiring vocabulary as a natural thing. Yeah. Not at the beginning, of course, but at some point it will be natural. I promise. Just keep insisting, and it will be natural. Did you have different approaches to start with new Slavic language, or always it was the same after knowing one or two of them? And what was the approach to start with Czech? No, I didn't have the same approach because the first one was Russian and I had no idea what I was doing. So I tried. I tried to use some methods that I knew before, because look, before studying Russian, um, yeah. So let me give a background here. My native language is Brazilian Portuguese, but my mom raised me in three languages, so it was like English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Then at the age of 18, I started learning French because of my work, and then I learned German. And after that, I learned Russian, and then I thought like, oh, I can use the same strategy. But no, I kind of struggle a little bit. But so at the beginning, no. When I started with Russian, I used Memorize, Assimil, but this language partner kind of taught me everything, because we had conversations like this. So she said the first sentence in English and then Russian, in English and Russian. We have a lot of conversations like this. But so I tend to be a very sociable creature, and as I mentioned before, I like to start speaking from day one. So with Ukrainian, Belarusian, Polish, and now with Czech, I start talking from day one. Um, and of course, I consume a lot of content. But I do not recommend you to do that if you have zero notion about the language family. So if you speak like if you already speak Russian and you want to speak Ukrainian, for example, you can understand a lot if you consume content, if you try to speak. But if it's your first Slavic language, I would recommend some easier steps like Asimil, for example. It's a great course. Um, but yeah, my approach tend to be the same since as I said, I'm a sociable creature. I love talking to people, interacting with people. So, and I love having this awkward conversations when I try to speak and then I use a little bit of I'm trying to speak Czech and I use a little bit of Polish, a little bit of Russian, and then I mix everything. And the person said, "Wait, calm down. What do you want to say?" I love these moments. Yeah. So, and after I got conversational level, so I started taking a look at the grammar. Only if I want a high level in a language. So in Polish, for example, I'm studying the grammar right now because I really want to speak Polish in a good way, not a little bit. Like it's my favorite language, as I said. So, but it depends. No, I don't have different approaches for the same linguistic family. I have different approaches if I'm going to learn a language from a different linguistic family, like Chinese, for example. That would be different. Probably I would focus on the tones first. I don't really know. But no, tends to be the same. It's just like, as I said, I love talking to people, so I just go there and talk to them, and I improve by doing that. Let's see if we have more. How does your social environment perceive you? How do you deal with ignorant comments like, why the heck do you learn that language? That's so hard, etc., etc. Well, normally I tend to ignore, like, and that's a good thing because, that's at some point it's kind of true. If someone asks me, why are you learning Belarusian if it's a not useful language? Probably it's not a useful language in terms of doing business, in terms of talking to people on the streets. But it's not useful for for you, but for me it is because I like it. I love it. So I tend to ignore. I tend to ignore the kind of comments. And like sometimes that thing like that's so hard, so hard. As I said before, you need to ignore that because if you start believing that the language that you want to learn it's so hard, so you stop learning it. So never ever accept that. Like, if people say that's so hard, no, that's different. That's just different. Yeah. But that's a good thing. You can always find people to motivate you. So as I mentioned, I have my language partners, and I kind of give this personal element to the language. So when I think about Belarusian, it's not a useless language that nobody speaks. It's the language of my friend Nikita. When I think about Polish, it's not the so freaking hard language that nobody can really read things. It's the language of my friend Magdalena. So I transform the language into a person. So I want to communicate with this person. I want to have this connection with this person. So I learn the language. Or you can do that with songs or books. Like, oh, I want to learn Russian. Why? Because I love Master and Margarita. Okay. So it doesn't need to make sense for the others around you. It does need to make sense for you because you need to know why are you doing what you're doing. Yeah. So that's it. Just try to ignore. Sometimes it's just ignorance. Yeah. So ignore. I just ignore. And sometimes I try to incentivize, of course. If people say like, no, but it's so hard, come on, try. I can help you. So that kind of stuff. But you need to stick to the plan. Stick to the plan, maintain it. So do we have more questions? Or that was the last one? You mentioned you have various partners. Okay. You mentioned that you have various partners for speaking in all Slavic languages. Do you pay them or do you speak to them just because they are your friends? Just because they are my friends? No. To be honest, so I have my friend Katya from Ukraine. She speaks now German and Portuguese because I taught her. I have my friend Nikita who was struggling with English. Now he's not. So, and actually, I didn't mention that, but I run a language school. So, I'm an English and Spanish teacher, and I run my language school. So that's kind of my job. So they have they have free access to all the help that I can provide. Yeah. So my friend Magdalena from Poland, for example, so she speaks now Spanish and Portuguese. So it's a real language exchange. I teach them and I learn from them. And that's kind of crazy, but their progresses are more important for me than my own progress. So I learn the language in the process, but my focus is to help them, yeah, not the other way around. So yeah, I have various partners for speaking all Slavic languages. Not all Slavic languages, all the languages that I speak, I have partners. And they are my friends, of course. They are my friends. It's not just like learning, as I mentioned before, and I would like that to be the golden point of this, the key point of all this presentation. Languages are just tools to communicate with people, not the other way around. So it's just like a friendship, and that helps a lot because you don't need to think like, oh, but what I'm going to talk about. Think you're going to have a coffee with a friend of yours. You don't need to think, right? Oh, what I'm going to say. What will be the topics? I don't know. I'm just going to spend some time with my friend. So, my friend Gabriel used to say, languages connect people, and that's true. Well, I guess that's the last question, and it was a pleasure. Thank you for joining, and see you soon.